From the former convent of the Good Shepherd overlooking Inwood Hill Park in New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where you meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we welcome Ran Zha. Ran is a Shanghai-born, Brooklyn-based playwright, director, and self-described audio gremlin. She is a current member of the WP Lab, Soho Reps Writers and Directors Lab, and is the Beatrice Terry resident at the Drama League. Her recent writing credits include the play Hava, the Giant, and the Oldest Bird at Rattlestick Global Form Festival. In addition, she is the resident director at the Tank, where she directed and composed for the film adaptation of Prometheus Bound. She's also guest directed at Barnard College and Montclair State University, and she is a commissioned playwright at Vanderbilt University. Ran is also a usual suspect at Exquisite Corpse Company, where she provided the sound design for the New York Times Critics' Pick Zoetrope, and has also designed sound for productions at Long Island University, Brooklyn, John Jay College, Theater Lab, and many more. We're going to talk to her about her writing, directing, and so much more. But first, let me welcome you, Ran, to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. It's been a pandemic. How are you?
It's, trudging along, doing what we do. Yeah. It's been nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you seem to have more memberships and to different arts organizations than any artist I know. Like, do you have merit badges for these memberships and like cards laminated? It's great that they're supplying resources to you that are helping you realize your projects. And you have so many of them. So just curious, how do you harvest all your energy into these? Are they all servicing the same projects, or are the memberships taking little pieces of different projects and helping you move them along? Just curious, because you seem to have a lot of affiliations.
Right. I guess the curious part of what we do in this industry is it's kind of like baking. I like to equate doing theater to baking because you collect a lot of materials and you have to sort of multitask. You're whipping the cream in one of the bowls, and then you're melting the butter, and then you're also chopping up all of the ingredients and putting them together. But once all of them is mixed together, you kind of just shove it in the oven and wait. So there is a lot of time that's waiting in between projects, and then there are also periods where you have to do 10 things all at once. You kind of have to learn how to juggle and then find time to take naps. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found that the older I get, the more I realize how much I love sleeping.
And maybe baking less items.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoy baking as well. Like, for real, not metaphorically.
Well, which makes the metaphor even more appropriate, I guess, then. So, and I guess, too, is like in that vein of like being helpful and offering resources and time, because time's a big part of doing a project, too, allowing the time for things to mix and gel and come together, so you have, something at the end of it all that may or may not taste good. Who knows? But you have to try anyway.
Yeah.
And the process is very much the journey as much as value in it as the product itself.
Yeah, I guess that's the part of our job that's unseen, I guess,
Yeah.
because, so for instance, Hava, the Giant, is a play that I started writing in 2018. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really see the light of day until last year,
right? In
front of the audience. So it might seem like I'm churning out 3 plays a year, but in truth, it's, a lot of the work goes into it was in the past 4 or 5 years of kind of picking up different pieces and eventually presenting.
Right. And that was a reading, just to pick up on that for a second, that was a reading you did at Rattlestick with my colleague, you, down there from my Columbia program days. And just for you, people who don't know, it's kind of a new global forms theater festival that they put together down there. And so, so what were you focused on? Because you said it's a process, and where in the process did you? I guess where were you going into trying to get out? Like, what were you trying to get out as a writer through that festival?
Yeah, that specific festival was interesting because
So it was a
as a
reading, right? It was a reading.
it was a staged reading.
Yeah.
So actors had scripts in their hands, but we also incorporated musical elements as well as certain design elements, including puppetry and shadow puppetry, as well as wearable puppetry. And because of the contracts that we were following under, there was a lot of interesting juxtaposition of performers doing stuff as well as stage crew or designers jumping in to like fulfill certain elements to realize the visual aspects of what is possible. So that's kind of how I see readings or stage readings and like workshops, anything in between the draft and the final production. Everything is sort of inviting the audience to see what you can see as a writer or director, or because you can see the potential, and you can kind of invite people in to taste a little bit of what might be possible if by some miracle you get the appropriate resources to actually put it up.
Right. And I assume they gave you those appropriate resources. Or did they not? Just curious, as far as like for that process.
For that stage, it was not envisioned to be a fully fledged production. So it was sort of just a sandbox where you could throw some ideas into it. And we had a really fast turnaround time. So it was lovely to work with all of the collaborators, especially, well, the Beatrice Terry residency was where I spent an entire year sort of continue to craft the script with my collaborators, and it culminated into putting this into a part of that festival. So those two programs kind of played out in tandem with each other.
Very cool. Very cool. That's kind of going back to what I said earlier. It's like you kind of, thanks for kind of like piecing it together there, because, hopefully these memberships and workshops and culminating into public facing performances of some kind, whether it's a reading or a workshop or a full production, it's all cascading and leaning towards a forward momentum with the ideas. And hopefully you've leaned ideas from that reading that were helpful or not helpful based off of your experience of how fast it was. Was it 29-hour reading then? Was it kind of what
That
it was?
one, yeah. That one was, those numbers are kind of arbitrary, right? Like, because...
Well, it's 20 hours you get to work with certain people. You're working on it. You can't even count the number of hours. And with the phone calls and the conversations and the emails and, the late night bar, what do you really think of this now? Now that I don't have you outside the rehearsal room.
Semantic text messages to people.
Yeah. But kind of what you said, we were talking a little bit off camera coming into it too, is like, there's like a flush and rush of energy now for a lot of people trying to get things done. And so it's great in a lot of ways that so much energy is focused on that work. And so what are the next steps for it?
For this particular piece, I think I've sent it out to a couple of grants, and I have some long-term relationship with certain theater companies that I'm hoping to work together on it, because this is a piece that's pretty near to my heart. So I'm hoping to see it in a as fulfilled form as possible, that I can sort of not to say control, but since I'm a writer director, I'm hoping that I could direct a premiere production of it, whatever that means. in New York or elsewhere.
It's very possible. Listen, you have the rights to the show. You can do what you want to with it. You have approval of the director. It could be you. Or it could be someone else you want to work with. You never know. But, sometimes, we'll say this, sometimes we're forced to compromise at times to move shows forward. No, it sounds like you're in a really good place. And we look forward to hopefully in the next year to see the next iteration of it. So do you think it'll be a full production or it'll be another workshop?
I'm not really sure because this year I actually put that piece on the shelf a little bit because both the Soho Rep Lab as well as the WP Lab has started. So I'm kind of focusing and rechanneling my energy to this new original piece that I'm generating with the Soho Rep Lab,
right?
As well as gearing towards building that community and connecting with colleagues who are my new peers with the WP Lab.
Congrats on both of that. And my friend Merope is just leaving Soho Rep now, actually. It's such great work. And Lisa McNulty is doing a great job at WP as well, another former colleague and or current colleague, I guess, from we're all theater makers here. Great. So what's the piece you're working on now?
So for Soho Rep, my creative collaborator, Risa Puno, who created The Privilege of Escape, which is where we met. The two of us are designing sort of a tabletop roleplay game inspired game theatrical experience that's coming from the point of view of Asian females. Mm-hmm. And during the pandemic, we kind of reconnected after having collaborated that one time that we were both experiencing a lot of increased amount of anti-Asian sentiments during the pandemic, which kind of spiked high.
Yeah.
So we were kind of just self-examining the more heightened emotions that's akin to rage or anger, but in a way cannot really be accessible to us in many ways. We also bonded over the fact that we both play D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. And
it's made a big resurgence since Stranger Things, I have to say.
Yeah, it is. And yes and no for us theater people, I guess, because
we've always been doing it.
Collective storytelling. It is what we do.
That's right.
D&D, the only difference is that there's no set. So we sort of keep telling the story, doing yes ending.
Right.
So we connected over that shared hobby and started talking about how rage as an emotion is a mechanism that this specific class, Barbarian, in the D&D players' rulebooks use to channel their power or protect themselves in one sense. So we wanted to kind of dig a little bit more into that and see how this emotion or rage manifests or play out depending on who you are or what your background is.
Very cool. Looking forward to the next iteration of that.
Yeah, working on it.
So is your primary focus now on writing or directing or just directing? I mean, you have those labs now too, because I was looking back what you did the past year. You were very busy as a director. You did, I know you did Sarah Rules Orlando at Barnard. Mm-hmm. Another friend of mine, Julian Evans, providing sound design. And I'm
a big fan of Julian.
Julian's a good guy. He's doing sound design for my show at the York coming up. I'll see him on Monday.
Say hi for me.
I will. And it's in your you mentioned the other ones too at Montclair State. So just curious if you're trying to stretch your legs as a director now too.
I think somewhere in my career, I made that accidental pivot into wearing the director hat as my primary practice of artistic practice. And I do really enjoy it because I think as a director, you could really realize the function of art maker as a builder of community. And uh, a mentor once mentioned that being a director means you have to be an excellent translator. You have to speak the language of every single collaborators you work with, and make sure that everybody is on the same page, and make sure in the room you can empower everybody and make sure everybody realize their agency to be a active contributor of a project that you ultimately create together. And you still have to take the responsibility as the captain of the ship. You stay with the ship if it sinks. So it's very rewarding, and there is also a little bit more structure when it comes to working as a director as opposed to working as a writer. You have, I think for me, having responsibility is very helpful because as a writer, nobody's telling me to do anything.
There's no parameters.
Yeah, like nobody wants me to write anything for real. I'm just kind of working for myself, and I don't have a deadline really because nobody cares. I mean, a lot of people care, I guess, but
Once you get a commission, people care.
yeah. But you can't really have a steady stream of commission work as a writer, and you have to sort of
very few people
search your passion and realize that you really want to work on this thing. And then a lot of time it's really elusive. Like the muse doesn't really come whenever you want to come. But as a director, I think there is more discipline, and it is a more honeable skill that I happen to also really enjoy. And I really love building worlds and realizing other writers' internal like artistic fantasy dreams onto the stage and figuring out how to solve problems.
Yeah, but I think your writing background helps you too. As I mentioned before,
so.
you've done. Well, my point is because you're trying to interpret the work, right? And film's a lot different. The director's medium in film, it's the writer's medium in theater, and so you're telling what tools can you use to tell that story, right? And the fact you can speak the different languages of the people who are on and off stage only helps you in deciphering what that story is for today, for this audience now. Someone else will do it, or you will perhaps do it differently in 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, it's been so interesting stepping a little bit into the film world because as a theater director, you're sort of more or less you more so stay in the neutral ground, and you make sure what you see is going to translate to what everybody sees. But with film, it almost feels like you want others to see what you see.
Right.
I don't even know if that makes any sense.
Well, I mean, you can't control it, but you can control their perspective. They still have the wheels turning, and their own experiences inform what they're taking from what they see. But you are guiding their perception, unlike theater, where it's all out there, and they can. Perhaps as a director, you can hopefully can shepherd them towards the story and the play that you want them to follow, and the playwright wants them to follow to be able to interpret that theme or storyline that works really well. But no, do you think you're now that you've directed a few things, it's informed your writing?
I think so, absolutely. I think it's more freeing as a writer. Okay, I rewind. So I think it's more freeing for me to be a writer if I know I'm going to direct my own work, because then I can go really wild with my stage direction, knowing that when I'm directing it myself, I'm not going to care what I had written.
Never about offending anybody, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
So the stage direction can be just very not realistic, but convey a sense of what my mind was when I was writing this particular section. Then when I look back, I can sort of land wherever that is, as opposed to like I don't need to write down that I need a couch because that can come later.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense. So also putting another hat on is your own sound designer hat, because you're skilled in that area of the world as well. And so in addition to being an audiophile, I'd be remiss not to mention the cool sound installation you contributed to our Culture Hub we did a few years back. And also we just had another fun installation of you from the shelves at the Greenlight Bookstore in Exits Fort Green.
I didn't.
Was that part of yours? Or no?
I didn't work on the sound, but I wrote the script.
Oh, you wrote the script.
I wrote
Okay.
a play.
I wasn't sure of how it was, but because you've done the audio experiences before, I didn't know how you played
Dina
into it.
Volfsey, the director, who's also now my cohort at the WP Lab, directed the piece, who also spearheaded the project.
Gotcha.
Along with other friends. And Brent Arnold did the sound.
Oh,
It was
okay.
brilliant.
Gotcha. Wasn't sure. Thanks for saying that. So are you focused on any other kind of like sound installation pieces or any kind of I don't know how you say it, the any projects like the stuff you've done at the Arctic Group too that you had a few years back, and
Yeah,
was curious about the whole ideas of exploring different ideas and installations.
I thought I was going to continue doing it because I started doing harmony in 2016 when I was back home. And looking back, I feel like I was doing social distance theater before social distance theater became a necessity. And then I thought I was going to continue doing one of them every year. But then I think audio theater became kind of, that scene kind of exploded. And I was feeling like there's no need for me to keep churning out material just because I felt like I needed to continue. When I did Harmony and then Echo and Siren, it was an instinct and then became a thought out trilogy in a way. But then after that, I feel like it was a good time to hit pause on that chapter and explore something else, but also like integrate my interest in music and audio design, composition, that sort of thing. I started writing more music because accidentally, also because it kind of, the job required it. And I kind of just started realizing that I enjoyed writing songs sometimes.
What's your instrument to write with?
My keyboard.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a classically trained pianist when I was growing up, so that still is a hobby even today. Yeah, but I enjoy doing sound engineering, sound designing, but I wouldn't say I necessarily seek that out as a primary outlet for art. I work as an audio producer occasionally with Black Revolutionary Media, and they always do really exciting and poignant works, so I enjoy doing that.
Very cool. Very cool. So it sounds like it's been a stepping stone to help you keep informing your own work again and pushing yourself forward as a creator, whether it's technically or but leading you to writing more music. So it's all been building and culminating, which is great. And I wanted to go back with that. I also wanted to go back to something you said earlier about finding the collaborations and moving it forward, and the directing helping your writing and things like that. Now that you've been through these different partnerships and you've had the experience with Rattlestick recently, and you're the WP Lab and moving forward with Soho Rep as well, like what have you learned from these collaborations outside yourself, because you've always been kind of insular in many ways, that have helped you move forward in you said trying to see the whole picture and moving yourself forward?
Collaboration as in like being a part of another company's project, or I mean,
Yeah.
I can speak to that because I think as an artist, I feel like I am perfectly fine with being the support. Kind of like being in a D&D party of adventurer, right? Like you have to sort of consider who you are and who you are in relation to your whole team, because you're working towards the same goal and
Right.
nobody is against anybody else. So for instance, if I'm signing on to be a collaborator on a project, I'm very willing to take a step back and support somebody else's vision or somebody else's idea. And because ultimately, I think we are all constantly inspiring each other in this industry. We're all colleagues. Does that make sense? I don't know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about. It all does. But it does make sense. It's saying you're playing your role literally from not just your character in D&D, but also
Yeah,
you're playing your
'cause-
role that's been you may be prescribed a role, but it's just a title. You have to actually figure out, if I'm interpreting you correctly, how your relationship to each other as part of that. You're all part of that whole, and figuring out your relationship with each other and how you can serve that whole.
Because you can't, it's also exhausting to be leading every single project that you work on, because that's not what being an artist is. I think you kind of take stock and practice your skills or whatever through like helping others or helping an idea and then turning it into your own idea somehow.
Well, I think that makes perfect sense. And so, what can we look forward this next year? What are you going to focus on through these labs and in your own work?
So I'm working on the lab, and we have a midterm presentation next year, followed by a final presentation in the fall. I am directing a piece at the Tank this coming season, which I'm excited about. What else? Well, I'm currently assisting Eric Ting, who is a director, working on Lloyd Suh's new play, The Far Country, which is set in San Francisco in the early 20th century, and it's sort of about the history of the Chinese Exclusion Act in the early 20th century after the railroad, as well as the Angel Island Detention Center.
No. And when does that begin?
Begins on the 17th.
All right, so at the Atlantic, correct? So people can check out the work there. And Eric knows a lot about San Francisco since he just came from there, I believe. Wasn't he at San Francisco Shakespeare Festival for many years? I think he just moved on, I think. So you can catch the show at Atlantic coming up. Well, Rand, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. And thanks for sharing all your exciting projects coming up. And before I make you move on to your technical rehearsal later today, where can people go to find out more about your current and forthcoming projects?
Yeah, I have to update it as well, but my website is ranxia.info.
Don't get .info much these days.
Yeah. Surprisingly, .org was taken with my name.
Wow. Do you find out who had it?
No.
Oh.
No, it was like a broken link when I tried to like find that website. But info is nice.
Some people are just, info is great. Yeah.
Makes it seem approachable.
Yes. Well, we're inwoodartworks.nyc, and so slightly different as well, but very local, so it makes sense for us too, you know. Well, listeners, you can find that link in the description of this episode, so make sure it gets out there for everybody to check out. And she'll be updating it, so stay tuned, folks, okay? Well, again, Thanks, Rand, for joining us on this Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. Many thanks to Church of the Good Shepherd here at Inwood NYC and to heightsites.com for Uptown promotional support. You can support On Air and all of our programming making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. You can also donate via Venmo at Inwood Artworks. Be sure to follow us on social media at Inwood Artworks to keep up with all that we do, which includes the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. Inwood Artworks On Air is proud to be supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. From the top of Manhattan and the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for tuning in. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks On Air.